Welcome to 99th Monkey Liberty News for Tuesday, April 8th, 2014. The first article that I have today is from Oath Keepers: How the International Banking Cartel Controls the World Through the U.S. Military and Economic Sabotage. I mentioned a video yesterday by Jim Willey. I watched part of it yesterday. I don't really fully agree with his point of view. I think he has processed the raw information somewhat differently from how I would. But it's interesting, and one of the things that he does mention is the fact that the dollar has been strong and Americans have benefited because America has sent its military to make sure that people honor the dollar. And the value of the dollar has really been based on military enforcement. That's really not just, that's not allowing other people to have their sovereign rights. It's unfortunate. I think there's a measure of repentance that needs to come. But another article that I mentioned yesterday was the David Wilcock, and that is actually very long, but very well worth reading. It's three separate. You have to click read more twice. But he has a much more optimistic view that, you know, there will be grace and mercy, and Americans will be able to press through. But we really do need to, it's time for us to wake up and begin to accept responsibility for what is going on in our country. And one way to do that is to just take a look at taxes and where the money goes that we pay in taxes. From Blacklisted News, Americans spend more on taxes than food, clothing, and housing combined. That is astonishing. It's incredible when you think about how much, you know, if people are people who make a decent living, you know, upper middle class people might pay 30-40% in taxes, and that is completely astonishing. I'll just let you think about that as I go to this next. I actually have my own blog here in the articles today. I just put this together. Tax time. This is an easy form, just to highlight, you know, that it's not lawful, according to the Bill of Rights. It is not lawful to require us to give personal information unless there's potential that we have committed a crime, and that the evidence can be shown that it's likely that we committed a crime. So just to kind of emphasize that, here's how this easy form, 1040 easy, is filled out. I have a guaranteed right to be secure in my person, house, papers, and affairs from government demands for information about me and my life unless the courts have reason to believe I have committed a crime. So that's the Fourth Amendment, and that's how that applies to filling out 1040s. Here's how the Fifth Amendment applies to filling out 1040s. I refuse to answer on the grounds that because tax fraud is considered a criminal offense, an incorrect answer, even if a mistake, could be construed as fraud and leave me open to criminal charges. I cannot be required to make statements that might tend to incriminate me. So really this whole thing is, you know, we aren't, constitutionally speaking, and according to the Bill of Rights, we shouldn't, really, the government can't make us fill out forms. Virtually all government forms that they want us to fill out infringe upon the rights that are guaranteed us by the Fourth and Fifth Amendments. And I would like to just read the Fourth and Fifth Amendments. The Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. I read this because we're meant to be secure in our persons and in our papers and effects, that we can't be required to give an accounting. We're not secure if we give an accounting. Something could be taken from us. And I want to read the Fifth Amendment. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime, unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. I want to put to you here that, this is dense, this is packed, and I could spend a lot of time on this, but I'm not going to. But I want to emphasize this aspect. We can't be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. When the IRS or some state tax entity freezes your bank accounts, you have been deprived of property without due process of law. I can't see this any other way. We've been polite, we've been nice, we've been raised to be polite, we've been raised to believe the government's good and helpful and we can trust them. Well, guess what? That's false. It never was true, and we've been duped. And at some point we have to stop being polite. Okay, so the Supreme Court maybe has issued rulings that these articles and the other articles don't say what they say. Well, it's obvious what they say. And we don't need a constitutional scholar. We don't need a legal scholar to interpret these paragraphs. They're simple, basic English. We can see for ourselves what they mean. And even though they were written some time ago, they haven't lost their punch. It's not unclear what they say. It's very clear what they say. And we all need to read them. And we need to, almost maybe like hang them up someplace where you see them every day and skim through them. And get a real grasp of what they say. It's crucial. It's foundational for how we live in this country, how we're meant to live in this country. From Electronic Frontier Foundation, Why Fusion Centers Matter, Frequently Asked Questions. This is, because I noticed this has caught my eye, but I also want to mention it because I'm focusing a little bit this morning on the Fourth Amendment. We are guaranteed to be secure in our persons, homes, papers, and effects. What the NSA is doing, what these government agencies are doing, is a clear breach of the Fourth Amendment. And I don't care what other laws have been passed. The Bill of Rights is some of the highest law in the land, and it trumps legislated law. It trumps regulatory law. It trumps statutory law. The Supreme Court used to examine new laws to see if they followed the bill, if they broke any of the Bill of Rights. And the Supreme Court has failed us because much of what I want to, this figure just pops into my head. This isn't scientific, but I'm going to say 80 to 85% of statutory and regulatory law is a breach of the Bill of Rights. Like I said, I'm just shooting from the hip. But as I scan through my mind and think about various laws, the percentage might even be higher. And from the 10th Amendment Center, no, secrecy does not trump the Constitution. The only thing that trumps the Constitution is, common law is somewhat high. And I've talked about the hierarchy of law. Common law is somewhat higher law than the Constitution. Just the idea, do no harm. But that isn't contradicted by the Constitution, so it's really kind of a moot point. And certainly secrecy does not trump the Constitution. Anybody who's saying that has not read the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and thought things true. So, good article here from the 10th Amendment Center. Always great perspective from them. And speaking of, the Bill of Rights being infringed upon, from the Daily Sheeper, Holder DOJ gun control efforts may include gun tracking bracelets. And at first blush, you can say some of these things do sound like a reasonably good idea, that the gun has technology that only the person who owns it can fire it, that might prevent children from getting hold of guns and accidentally firing them. Of course, I can think of better ways, just put the ammo out of reach or in a locked place and keep the key in a separate secret place. There are ways, just to be smart about handling firearms. But even if, you wanted to go this far and have this kind of technology, the problem with anything like this is that it could be used to shut down the firearms remotely and block the use of the person who is meant to use them. And, there's also concern about the reliability of smart guns. But their greatest fear considering smart guns must be the misuse by a tyrant of mechanisms designed to render their weapons inoperable. So, there it is. Just again, what these people want to do does not trump the Constitution, does not trump the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is a higher law. This kind of law is subservient to the Bill of Rights. And I've actually heard, and I don't have an article for this, but I've heard people say, and I've read, that sovereigns can elect whether or not to obey statutory and regulatory law, that those kind of laws do not reach to sovereigns, that sovereigns voluntarily follow those kind of laws. So there are just a lot of issues here. We've been so buffaloed, so cowed into this little corner of how the government expects us to behave. And we haven't questioned it. Why haven't we questioned it? But it's not too late. I believe it's not too late. So now is the time to question. This was an interesting article. I first saw this on a blog that I tend to believe is disinfo, but this seems to be a genuine news article. Ebola clinic in Guinea evacuated after attack. Angry mob claims Doctors Without Borders introduced deadly disease to the country. And that is quite an accusation. But you know, it's. I'm not saying that I agree with that or that is true. But if the cabal really wants to trigger something that is going to cause their defeat, their imminent defeat, to be delayed or canceled, I think they would do it. And I can't, you know, in my own mind, I can't rule out the possibility that they would intentionally trigger some bioweapons to actually accomplish something like this, like the Ebola being released. Moving on to some news about Ukraine, which still continues to flare up. From Zero Hedge, Separatists in Ukraine city of Luhansk said to take 60 hostages and rig building with explosives. Update: as expected, the denial of the propaganda didn't take long. Protesters in Luhansk, Ukraine deny having explosives and holding hostages in state security building. What's true? It's pretty difficult to know for certain exactly what is going on there. Here's another Zero Hedge article. Russia accuses U.S. mercenaries of inciting civil war in Ukraine. And I just want to say Zero Hedge articles are just tremendous. And they have branched out a little more recently. They really had been focused on economic issues. And of course, there are economic aspects of this issue. But I'm really glad to see that they are writing more political articles, because they do tremendous research and they really hit the nail on the head. So this is something else going on in Ukraine. Russia accuses U.S. mercenaries of inciting civil war. Well, in a way that's old news, but I think it's, you know, there's fresh talk about it, and I think that it's something that is worth revisiting. Paul Craig Roberts has an article from a couple days ago. Obama issues threats to Russia and NATO. I'll let that speak for itself. And from Blacklisted News, Russia tells Ukrainians referendum or we can't protect you as Ukraine proposes state of emergency. And interestingly enough, here again, this is a Zero Hedge article. I happened to see the tweet from Blacklisted News, so I have it here. Eastern Ukraine may go and become a part of Russia. And considering that their former prime minister, that the lady with the braids, said that, you know, they needed to kill 8 million Russians who were left in Ukraine, we can see why some portions of Ukraine would want to become a part of Russia. From the Coyote blog, today's lesson in unintended consequences, safety mandates that may reduce safety. And this article specifically is written about the fact that older decommissioned cell phones that are no longer being used, can still be used to dial 911. And evidently there have been thousands of these calls to 911, and they're false, and they waste a tremendous amount of time. I'll just skip to this paragraph. In the San Francisco Bay Area alone, anonymous dialers have made tens of thousands of false 9/11 calls since 2007, with Nomar alone believed responsible for over 30,000. And they know that because call center operators can detect a disabled phone, in part because no phone number shows up on their screen. So this has become a really big issue. The fact that this was intended to help people be safer. That decommissioned phones that are not active, could still be used to call 911. But surprise, what they actually do is not keep people safer, but divert resources away from where they are more needed, and thereby reducing safety. Here is a bit of what I'm calling good news today from End the Lie. Ohio newspaper suing federal government after 2 journalists were detained by the military. Yeah, that's what, if we file lawsuits. I mean, I see that as a way to, if the government courts won't prosecute people, if they won't rein in their minions, then we begin to file lawsuits, civil suits. And while it's true that tax money goes to pay those damages, which Alex Jones frequently points out, at least there is some accounting, and people become aware of what's going on. So I find this to be good news and a significant article. And I'm ending today with this. This is not so much good news, but it's kind of in the entertainment realm. So it's a little more lighthearted, although the ideas are pretty intense. Washington's blog wrote a kind of review on The Walking Dead. Welcome to Terminus. And this is a pretty long article and examines many things. And as I said, it's not really all that positive. Zombification of America. It's just kind of a perspective through the eyes of what happens in this show, The Walking Dead. And I am a fan. I have mentioned how I think that while this is very harsh and definitely not beautiful, I think it can be helpful to kind of test ourselves and to kind of steel ourselves. I don't believe that things will go this far. I really don't. Not that they're, forget the zombies, but I don't believe that our lives will become this desperate. But as the author of this post wrote, a week without, if there were some kind of a societal breakdown, it would only take a week for people to begin to behave really irrationally and, if I can use, just madly. So to kind of be prepared and, just consider, okay, how can I protect myself? How can I help my neighbors? Certainly building community ahead of time is advantageous. But just examining our culture in the U.S. and, we have a pretty thin veneer. One of the things that I personally have enjoyed about The Walking Dead, and I've mentioned this in the past, is that it attaches a pretty high value to Scotch-Irish culture. And I'm not, raising up one culture over other cultures, but that is the culture on which most of the good, what we look around in this country, certainly at least is maybe, large percentage founded on that culture and the Puritan work ethic. And some of the things that we see that are evident in The Walking Dead. So people may not agree with me, but that's fine. Thank you for tuning in for today's 99th Monkey Liberty News. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Hoping that you will love one another, take care, and read and enforce the Bill of Rights.